Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Career or family? It's a decision many people feel forced to make. But when today's guest, Shannon Miles, realized that her work and family were no longer aligned, she decided there had to be a third option. Fast forward to today, and Shannon and her husband Brian are the co-founders of BELAY Solutions, a virtual staffing solutions company that offers remote executive assistant, bookkeeping, copywriting, and web support services. They've made the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing private companies for 3 years in a row and were recently ranked number one on Entrepreneur's top company culture list in the small business category. On today's episode, Shannon and I talk about the shift toward a virtual workplace, practical tools for teams working remotely, and advice for leaders who want to create a more flexible work environment for their employees. I was fortunate enough to find my own executive assistant through Belay, and let me tell you, it was a game changer for me personally and professionally. So let's get right to it. Here's my conversation with Shannon Miles. All right, so your book is called The Third Option. What do you mean by a third option?
Women do not have to choose between career and family anymore like we used to. There's so many spaces and options in between that need to be explored. And I think men struggle with this at times in their lives too, where they feel like, God, my career's taken over. I don't have any time for my family. I need to make this big sweeping change. But the truth is, there are so many options of part-time virtual work that's full-time that really does allow for us to have it all and really be successful in our business and our lives.
And when did you sort of, realize that the third option was in fact the right option for you? Sort of maybe you can tell that story.
Yeah. I mean, the origin story for this was when I was working full-time selling for a healthcare software company that I absolutely loved. Like I had reached the pinnacle of my little career at that point, like 6 years into my professional career. And my husband and I were like, hey, let's have a baby. Now seems like a great time to go ahead and do that. And the plan was for me just to go back to work. We had a nanny lined up. And because I loved my job so much, I wanted to keep doing it. And he was working in a sales job that he loved too. So I did. I went back to work after an awesome 3-month maternity leave. But what I did not factor in is how much I was going to love this little baby girl and really feel like I was missing out on too much of her life to feel like that was the right thing for our family. So after being unsettled back at work for about 4 months, I went to my boss and I was like, listen, I love this company. I love my job. I love to work. But I love this baby and I cannot, this isn't working anymore. And I want to honor the experience I've had here. I'd like to do this part-time job from home and kind of phase it out. Thinking at that time, Molly, that it was either keep climbing the ladder, working in the corporation or don't work at all. Those seemed like the two most apparent options.
Got it.
But we had not financially planned for me to stay home. So just walking in and quitting was not going to work. So I had to get paid out these back commissions that I had accumulated in sales, right?
Sure.
And so I was like, I got it. This is the perfect thing. I'm going to propose this part-time role, phase it out, get paid this commission, stay home. Even though honestly, I didn't want to stay home. I knew that I couldn't keep working like I was.
Right.
So anyway, I go in and I propose this brilliant plan to my boss, and he says no. No, we'll just restructure your territory. We'll figure out a way to make it work. It'll be fine. And I'm like, oh my God, I was so convinced that this was the right thing. What am I going to do now? I had planned on a no.
Sure.
So I went home and I talked to Brian, and I was so convinced this was the right thing for our family. The next day I went in and talked to his boss and proposed the same thing because I knew something had
Wait,
to
you went to
change.
Brian's boss. You went to your husband's
No, no, no,
boss?
no, no. I talked it through with Brian and went to
Got
my
it. Okay.
boss's boss. Yikes. I went over his head. Not something I would recommend, but I was desperate. Like I had to do something. Um, Unfortunately, I had the opportunity to work with that boss. His name was Mark on a couple of deals, so I had some credibility. I had sort of like earned my stripes there, and he said, "Yeah, I get it. I've worked with a lot of women in the territory, in the sales territory before who've struggled with the same thing." And I think he was wise enough to know, like, if your heart's not in it, like, there's no sense in trying to force an employee to
Sell you on
stay.
staying. Right, right. Okay.
Yeah. So he went to bat for me and he made it work. And what I thought was just going to be a temporary position to phase out and stay home just kept working for the next 6 years until we decided to start Belay.
And so how did that transition happen? So you're part-time, you're digging it, it's working. And by the way, how did your relationship with your boss, right, your direct report, settle out?
Well, there were a lot of issues there. That was not a fun
Got
conversation,
it.
I will
Okay.
say.
Got
So
it.
very quickly, I transferred out of that group into this other part-time role, and it switched bosses. And she was actually a phenomenal boss who worked with me every step of the way to make this thing continue to work. She was incredible. I actually just met up with her again recently, just and thanked her for all of her investment in me over the years.
Really
So
cool.
that's a whole other conversation about mentors. But anyway, yeah, so that was like 2006 through 2010, where I entered this new season of being unsettled. And at this point, we had our second child. Harper was 2, Rainey was 5. So still pretty young kids at that point. And I don't know if you've experienced this at various points in your career or not, but like something had to change again. And it wasn't anything egregious. It wasn't anything life altering like having a kid or whatever, but I was just in the season of the company had gotten toxic. I started to feel ineffective in my role. And I started to look around in a company that I had been 10 years with. And for the first time in the history of that tenure, there was no right next step for me. And I was like, okay, so this change that I'm being pushed toward is greater than the next role in the company. And
Wow.
yeah, it was just overwhelming. And at the same time, Brian was feeling this same unsettledness in his profession and had kind of reached the limit of his potential in his company that he was in.
Okay.
And we had always like toyed with the idea, oh, wouldn't it be fun to have a company someday? We could have some freedom and autonomy that these corporate jobs don't provide, but never exactly knowing what it should be. And so when we were both in this season of like ready for a big change and it really feeling like early 30s is the time to take this risk, we decided in the summer of that year what we were going to do, and that was to create a virtual assistant company.
Right. BELAY Solutions, sure.
Which exactly became Belay. And so in making that decision, we incorporated, kind of got our ducks in a row from a legal perspective, set up our accounts and everything, took our 401ks, and used those as seed funding for the business so that we could really not have to take on outside investment initially. Quit our jobs on the same day, or gave notice on the same day, October 1st. Happy birthday to me. And yeah, finished up about 6 to 8 weeks later, and we were all in on Belay December 1st, 2010.
Gal, and you guys I know have grown so quickly. And you operate inside of this virtual environment as well. I mean, you live it.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. And I think the world is moving this way in some regards. And we're seeing, more of this inside of some organizations. And certainly, I think we're finding people wanting more of this. What would you say to leaders who are maybe reluctant about making a shift like this?
Yeah. So for a little bit of context, we have about 700 team members and we all work from home. And so we are all in on this virtual, remote working atmosphere. We totally believe in it. And it can be scary if it's an environment that you're not familiar with. And it can be a little different than being in an office with somebody day in and day out. But the benefits far outweigh the risks.
Mm-hmm.
And my assistant is virtual, obviously,
Sure.
and it does take time to build a relationship and a rapport, but with intention, it is totally possible. And the things that I give to her are not just business tasks and responsibilities to do, but it's personal too. And so it's once a leader has an incredible assistant, it doesn't really matter where they are. This whole model that we built was based on Brian's experience with his virtual assistant in Charlotte, and we live in the Atlanta area, and that's what we replicated across thousands of clients that we've served.
Sure. And I'm one of those clients, by the way, which is you've served me so well, and I couldn't echo that enough. When you have a strong executive assistant, the amount of productivity you can do what is essential for you to only do, right? And
Yeah.
so what kind of structures do you guys have in place with Belay to ensure that this remote work environment is productive, healthy, that it works?
Yeah, there are so many people who want to live out this third option and kind of have the freedom and flexibility of working from home, but it is still work from home, right? Like it
Sure.
is work. And so we want to be very diligent on the front end of all of our screening processes to make sure that people are realistic with their expectations for what this is going to entail. So it's not just kick it in your pajamas all day. Like you're coming to work, you're just doing it remote. Now, if you want to wear yoga pants on the bottom, it's totally fine. But you come professional. So we really spend a lot of time and energy with our talent acquisitions team, making sure that we're communicating the right things in the market to prospective assistants. And then once their resume crosses into our system, like making sure that we are rigorous in finding amazingly talented people who value working from home and who really are here to serve. They've got to be incredibly resourceful, right? Because you probably experienced this with your assistant. Like no 2 days are the same.
Sure.
You can't go into a situation thinking, all right, I know these 5 things and that's what I'm going to do. Like we're learning new things all the time as technology changes. And so we're really looking for somebody who is incredibly resourceful and then somebody who can over communicate. Because I think part of the fear in, working with a virtual assistant or anybody in a virtual capacity is trust, right? And the best way to overcome that fear of trust is communication. And so we really, like from day one, before we ever assign an assistant to a client, we make sure that their communication is clear, it's quick, and it's thorough. And that really helps to build the trust.
Right. And so how do you build a culture, at Belay, right? I mean, you have 700 virtual people and inside of organizations, and there are very large organizations that have people working obviously remotely. How do you recommend to people to build a culture in sort of this remote setup?
You have to be intentional. I mean, culture is going to happen in an organization, whether you like it or not. And
Sure.
So you may as well get out ahead of it and craft it the way you want it to be. And we live and die by our culture at Belay. I mean, it is one of my most favorite things about owning a business is that we have the opportunity to create the type of company that we want to work for. I mean, that's incredible.
Unbelievable. Sure.
And so we really invest in the whole person. Like we're not here for a transaction. Like we are very selective about the clients we bring on. We look for amazing people like you because we know that if you bring on a bunch of clients who want slaves, that's going to diminish your culture. Like that's not, if we wouldn't want to serve them, we don't take them on, right? And I think, I think because we all work from home, there is this big integration between personal and professional that we're okay with. Like, we really want to foster genuine relationships with our team members and have that integration of like your high low on Friday isn't just about the deal that you just sold. It can also be like your mom is in remission again. Like those relationships matter. And so we put a premium on them.
So what are some of the systems you put in place to create a healthy culture and healthy communication and trust? I mean, what would with people that are inside of these virtual, what would you tell them to do to create even a better connection with anybody that's virtual with them?
Yeah, I think the first step is creating very clear expectations of the role and the job. Because I think when there's confusion around that, it serves to just erode any trust that you already have. Like, so we try to be incredibly clear with all of our job descriptions, and like the type of people that we're looking to hire. So that's the first step. I think the second is, once they are on the team, making sure that they are resourced and equipped with what they need to do the job, and that we're here as leaders to support them in that. And then I think, there's just some really practical tools too. Like, we workplace for communication. We have our entire team in a closed group on that so that they can collaborate on highs and lows and announcements. And Slack is very popular these days, and that's a great vehicle for communication as well. But I think there are no shortage of technologies out there to facilitate connection with virtual teams. But I think that, like, the overarching theme is you have to be intentional in your communication. And it starts with us as leaders and transparency. So what I mean by that is we have very clear defining objectives for our company. We set them annually. And that way, everybody in the company knows exactly what's important to our leadership team and what we're all marching toward together. And so we set those at the beginning of the year, but then we're updating the team every 2 weeks on how we're tracking toward them. And that really helps knit everybody together to our shared vision and how they play a part in us achieving it.
Well, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that I think is so interesting is clarity, communication, obviously using technology systems and transparency are such an important part, candidly, of even a brick and mortar office setup, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that you may find moments where you find that the clarity and the communication and the transparency is even better than it might be in a regular work environment because you have to over-index there, I would imagine.
That's exactly right. And I think there's this assumption, well, if we're in an office together, then everybody just sort of knows what's going on. Like people will just be informed by osmosis. And that's not true. But when you're working virtually, that's not going to happen. You know that nobody's going to know what's going on unless you're the one communicating it to them. So it does force this intentionality. I noticed that Pat Lencioni was one of your guests, right?
For sure. Yeah, he's amazing.
Amazing leader, amazing person, amazing consulting team. And we actually engaged one of his consultants in 2017 as we had a newly formed leadership team at BELAY. We had rebranded and consolidated 5 companies into one. So we were like, this is the year to invest in our team development. So we engaged Rishi and we learned so much that year, and we forged a great relationship with their organization. Had a chance to meet Pat, went out there and talked to him about virtual teams in general, because BELAY was the very first virtual team that Rishi had ever coached, and maybe even one of the first the table group had coached at all.
Wow,
okay?
Interesting.
So he's like, this is different. There are some differences, but not as many as people would think. So we sat down with Pat and we're talking to him about everything that we implemented and how we function as an organization. And he said, you're really not that different than our team here at the table group.
Wow.
They're very similar. And so I think there's an assumption of how virtual companies work that's way different than our reality. And I can only speak for BELAY, but it functions like a healthy brick and mortar. It's just we do it from our homes.
So if I'm a leader listening and I've got an employee or a few that I know want this, how would you advise them to navigate that process?
Yeah, we're getting asked that a lot because it is definitely the trend, like you mentioned earlier. And I think, more and more people are looking for the third option. So it's going to come up, soon if it's not already a topic of conversation in your organization. So I think there are some small steps that we can take. We built this thing from the ground up virtually. So I respect when somebody's like, okay, nice for you, not going to work for me, right? Or that ship's already sailed. But something as small as starting the conversation, creating an open environment on your team to allow for somebody to say, hey, this is what I'm proposing, and here's why. Here's why I want to be able to work from home, and really looking at them as a whole person and how you can help them achieve their goals. I mean, that goes such a long way to employee engagement and retention. So having the conversation, creating that open environment. And then second, I would say, just try it. Just try it a day or two a week and have very clear expectations of when they're going to be available, meetings that they're going to be participating on or in. And I would say the third thing is use video technology. That makes all the difference. When you can see someone instead of just having a phone conversation or even an email exchange, that eyeball to eyeball, even if it's just through Zoom, makes a tremendous amount of difference for engagement and trust.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Obviously, being able to make that eye contact is so powerful. No question. What about a company that might listen to what you just said, which I totally get, and say, yeah, but I'm worried. I mean, if I do this for one, I have 8 direct reports. If I do this for one, my people are going to be coming in the door, and I don't want to set a precedent. And so they worry about sort of that. What advice do you have for somebody in that situation?
I would ask them why they're afraid to set a precedent. What are they really afraid of? Are they afraid that they can't trust their employees? Are they afraid that they're going to slack off if they're in a different location? Like, get to the source of that fear. Maybe it is legitimate fear because working from home is not for everybody. It's for a lot of people, but it's not for everybody. Some people genuinely need to be in an office environment with other people 40 hours a week, and that's fine. So I think the leader can be very clear, like, I'm doing this for Molly, but we're testing it out. And so we will let you know when we're ready, if we're ready to roll it out beyond Molly, and just be really clear that, you need a season of kind of working through the kinks and figuring out how it's going to function in your organization. But I mean, you talk about it all the time. We do not have to be afraid at work. Like this whole virtual thing does not have to be as scary as we've made it out to be.
Right. Yeah. That's a cool way to say it. What kind of people do you think, if I'm a leader and I've got a team of 8 people, let's say, and what kind of things are going to give me an indication that I think this person can work? I mean, beyond the obvious, right? Beyond they're a self-starter, beyond they're transparent, beyond the clarity, if I've got a team like that, how would I know the kind of person that could maybe make it work and the kind of person that maybe would struggle with that? And maybe they don't even know that they would struggle, right? But you as their leader go, I don't know if they're wired for that.
I mean, maybe if you have a hard time getting things out of them to begin with at work, they're probably not the best person to start with. But I would say if they are, high capacity, high producer, very communicative, like doesn't need direction every day. That might be the key thing. Like if you've got somebody who walks into the office on a Monday and he knows exactly what he needs to be doing that day and doesn't have to be directed, or check in midday, like, yeah, he's probably fine. I mean, here's a great example. Like one of our team members, we never would have been able to get him if we weren't remote because he lives all the way in Noonan. Okay. So for us in the Atlanta area, and I live in north of the city, like it's a long drive, even if you're in the city.
And so for people that don't know Atlanta, that are in Istanbul right now, how far is that?
Could easily be a 2-hour commute.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Hour and a half on a great day. But traffic is never great. So anyway, he's working for a large corporation and there's one particular day of the week where there are no meetings in this company. It was a Wednesday. So he went to his boss and he said, could I work from home on Wednesdays? I'm finding it hard to have balance and accomplish the things personally that I need, but I want to be able to work and still put in my 8 hours. I just would like to be able to do it from home. And his boss said kind of the same thing, like, no, it'd be setting a precedence. You need to be in the office. I see my kids on Saturdays and that's the way it is. And he promptly turned around and said, thank you very much, went back to his desk and wrote his resignation. Like, he's like, I'm not going to allow that to be my life. And I think we're going to find that more and more, especially with the millennial generation, where they recognize you literally can work from anywhere in the world. I mean, there are organizations like Wondrous Life and Remote Year that they're crafted around that whole model of travel the world, but but work while you're doing it.
Well, and one of the things I've heard either you or Brian talk about is that you focus on, and I love this, expectations rather than tasks. Talk about that a little bit. And I think that's cool for anybody, whether you're virtual or not.
Yeah, it's kind of in the line with Stephen M. R. Covey's speed of trust concept. Like when you delegate over responsibility to somebody as opposed to tasks, it does two things. It takes that burden off of you to direct every step of their work, but then it also gives them freedom to figure out the best way to get the result that you're looking for. And so when you're just, lobbying over, do A, do B, do C, like when C's done, they're back to you. It's like, okay, well then I got to tell them to do D and E and F. And it's like, is this even worth it, right? How many times have you heard, oh, it's not that bad. It's just easier for me to do it myself.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Which as a leader of a growing organization is crazy,
for
right?
Sure.
Like we can't do it all ourselves. We have to replace ourselves with key areas of the business. And delegation is a key way to do that. And so like for my assistant, I'm very clear, like if we've got an event to plan or something, that here's the overall outcome of what we need to achieve. You've got freedom within that to figure out how to do it. I'm here for you if you need approval or some more guidance or whatever, and we can work together, but like, you got this.
Yeah. Support.
And it's so empowering.
So for somebody that's maybe listening that was where you were years ago when you walked into your boss and that are considering having a conversation like this or considering thinking about it as something viable for themselves, what tough question would you have them ask themselves about making this kind of like work-life shift for themselves and their teams?
I would ask, what is it worth?
Okay.
What is it worth? I could have gotten fired. I could have gotten like demoted to a position that I didn't want, just kicked out of that role altogether, but then not gotten the job that I hoped for. But would all of that have been worth it for me to find that balance and that freedom that I was looking for? And then I think the second thing is, what is your definition of success?
Sure. Clarity on that. Yeah.
It's so simple, but it's so profound at the same time. Is your definition of success that you're going to be, climbing the ladder forever and you'll finally get to the top and then you'll live life then? Or is it...
Bad idea, by the way, for the record. Right? Bad idea.
Because it doesn't work. Or is success like, I still want to be able to work and contribute and grow my profession, but I also want to be there when my kids get off the bus. Like that for me is success. And being honest with yourself that there are seasons for everything too. And if you make a decision like mine where you're, taking a step back, so to speak, for your career, like that was a seasonal thing. My third option looks way different now than it did 13 years ago when my daughter was born, which that doesn't even sound right. She cannot possibly do that all now. That there are seasons and you have to be honest with yourself about what's serving you in that season and what isn't.
Well, and I would also just add that I think inside of difficult conversations that you start with questions and curiosity. And so I think sometimes people worry that they have these kinds of conversations and that, you're probably not in the right work environment if you think that you're going to have this conversation and you're going to get fired on the spot. And that these conversations don't have to work all at once. You don't have to finish it and get it done in one conversation. And if you start with curiosity around, is this something that we would ever consider? Have we considered it in other office locations? I think when we lead with curiosity and we can begin those conversations hopefully in a healthy way and recognize we don't have to. I think that's one of the mistakes I made a lot when I was young. I thought these meetings and these deals or things had to happen all at once. And it's okay to have a couple. And learn a little bit and then go reboot and learn a little bit and go reboot. And then maybe you go in and ask for what you want once you have clarity around what matters to them.
And I think too, we can't be selfish in our approach, right? Especially if you're in this situation like me where you're working for a company and you're asking for something for them, like you have to also position like what's in it for them? What's the win for them?
Right.
And you have to have the credibility and the track record to have the gumption to even go in and have that conversation.
Right, 100%. Is there any data, Shannon, out there now on the growth of sort of this virtual work environment over the last 13 years, right? Or 10 years since you started Belay. I mean, I'm sure there's an uptick, right? Do you know what it is?
No, that's a great question. If I quoted you anything, I wouldn't be able to validate it quickly. But yeah, there definitely is. I mean, it's on the rise. A lot of different demographics too. Like you think of, people who are millennials who have gone to college and they go to work for a company and they're completely disenfranchised. They're like, this is what I went to college for? No way. I'm not doing this. All the way to people who are in the sandwich generation and they are having to not only grow their careers, but also take care of children and their aging parents and be the primary care coordinator for that. And so sometimes, I mean, traditional work is just not working for a lot of people anymore. And I think that the platforms and the technologies and the culture shift is there to really expand our horizons on how this can work. So I'd be happy to pull some up and we can include it in the notes.
Let's do it.
For you, because I think it's a great question to ask.
Great idea. Great idea. So fast forward 10 years from now, what do you see the future of work looking like internationally, but certainly in the US? What do you think that's going to look like?
I think we're going to see an increase in co-working locations. We already have, right? They're popping up everywhere. And they just provide such a beautiful hybrid of a space to work in, especially if you're a small business owner and you're trying to grow while keeping your costs down, but then also a community to surround yourself with of like-minded people. I think we're definitely going to see a rise in that. I think we're going to see a lot of traditional corporations have a problem to solve. I think they're going to have a leadership deficit of people who recognize this is a job I don't have to do from the office. And if you can't let me work from home, this is not the company for me. So I think traditional, in brick and mortars are going to have to figure that out. And then I think you're going to see a lot of companies like Belay from the ground up completely distributed, because there is absolutely no reason in 2018 that you can't build an organization virtually and have an amazing culture in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can say you guys have done that and done that so well. And the people I've had the pleasure and honor to meet inside of the organization, I've just continued to be impressed with the quality, the authenticity, and the process. You make the process so simple for someone to onboard an executive assistant, and you can do it quickly, efficiently. And the people that I know when I went through this process that you dropped in my lap, I mean, it was hard to pick, right? I mean, they were all 10s, and the amount of time that was saved was incredible. So,
thank you.
So with that, we end with a rapid fire section, right? So I'm gonna load you with a couple quick fire questions, and you're just gonna tell me what comes up.
All right, let's do it.
All right, what was your first job?
Besides babysitting, I was a waitress at Ponderosa.
Ooh, outstanding. What's your favorite book?
Good to Great. It was the first meaty business book I read after starting Belay.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
People who have the right of way in traffic but don't take it. Drives me nuts. Like if they are turning right and you're turning left, they need to go ahead and turn right and not let you go.
Well, there's you're a little type A in there, huh, girl? I'm with you on that one, by the way. What's your favorite app?
My favorite app is Downcast. I love podcasts, and that's the app that I use to aggregate them all.
What's your favorite way to unwind?
Yoga.
Nice, girl. Me too.
Yoga. Come on. You too?
For sure. Well, it's a vinyasa kind of style flow, but oh yeah, for sure. It's the greatest. It's the greatest. I think moms and dads all over the world, it's a powerful thing. It's amazing.
It checks all the boxes.
Right on. What's the best advice you've ever received?
If your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough.
Mm-hmm. Love it. So the show is called Game Changers. So one last question for you. Who is a game changer that inspires you and why?
So the game changer for me is who gave me that quote, and it's Richard Branson. I mean, I know he inspires a lot of people, but for me, he transcends his companies, and it's just so amazing to watch, like his charisma and his intelligence and compassion. And I had the opportunity to like meet him, and you felt like you were the only person in the room, which is absolutely insane, right? Like a million other people he could or should be talking to, but that inspired me to say, look, never get so busy that you can't sit down and have a genuine face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball conversation with somebody and be present for them.
I tell you what, it's hard to do in the world we live in today, but it's so powerful, and it sends a really powerful message when people do that. That is really cool that you connected with him in that way. That's awesome. So Shannon, where can people find out more about Belay, the third option, all that?
Okay, so you can find out information about Belay at belaysolutions.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at Shannon K. Miles, and that will, you can link to whatever on the third option for that, but you can also find the book on Amazon.
Awesome. Shannon, thanks so much for coming on.
All right, thanks, Molly. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.